That's my baby girl right there. Ooh, she with her friends. I'm a dog, I ain't shit. I'ma wind up in her friends. Bad guy, outlaw. Ooh, I'm like Pac, but I ain't die after the second time I got shot.
This is your boy Internal Sadist. Here to enjoy everybody's pain and pleasure and make it my pleasure for all intents and purposes. I'm the type of nigga that wakes up every day thinking about who I can piss off today, how many people I can piss off today, and how fast I can do it in. But today's topic's going to be, what's up, New Elder Monk? Or MGTOW Elder Monk? What's going on today? How you doing today, pimpin'? But today's topic is going to be about emotional intelligence. This bothers a lot of people when you talk about it, for the fact that there's a lot of people who actually suffer from this. And I always found it funny how many people actually suffer from this, and people always try to put me in the same category as them when it's like, no, we working on two different wavelengths. I wake up every day looking to piss somebody off or looking to get into some damn trouble. You wake up every day thinking about pissing somebody off or thinking about getting into trouble. I mean, you wake up every day basically emotional about everything that anybody can do to you that makes it so, you can actually respond to them. When in fact, I wake up every day thinking of who I can piss off that day, how fast I can piss them off that day, and how fun I think it would be, and how much enjoyment I'm going to get out of the shit. Two totally different mindsets. You wake up butthurt. I wake up looking to make somebody butthurt. It's like typically the fundamental difference between me and other people. Like, I don't get emotionally attached to shit. I do enjoy things. I do enjoy like making people cry or pissing people off, let it be a man or a woman or, it doesn't matter. Like, I enjoy it. It's what I do. Welcome to my world. But like what I'm talking about is emotional intelligence that a lot of people seem to don't really have in this day and age. The problem with this emotional intelligence is people lack it. People lack it. People lack it, and the problem with it is the people who lack it. The people who lack it is they suffer. They suffer because of usually environmental things, the way they grew up, biases, beliefs, gender based. It's either gender based, basically, upbringing, beliefs based on narrow mindedness, skewed and biased views for all intents and purposes. Like a good example is the about a couple months back. I would say about like Marchish, Mayish. I was having a conversation. I heard this SJW dude having a conversation about some shit that he knows nothing about, COVID virus. He was talking about like how all these other countries can't afford to have kits because they're third world countries and they're poor and this, that, and the other. So the numbers are obviously skewed. So they obviously have higher numbers than us because it's impossible for all these other countries not to have higher numbers than us because they're third world countries and they don't have the medical care and this, that, and the other. And I had to correct that little fool, basically. I basically said to him, "You're wrong for several reasons. One, I work in the healthcare. I work in the health field. Two, all the rest of the countries actually have kits. Hell, Africa's bought kits. Matter of fact, Africa's bought kits, tested them on fruit and a goat, and it came back positive on a fruit and goat. So obviously they found out quickly that the kits were faulty and they sent them back." And he goes, well, what about the Latin American countries? I said, all the Latin American countries have kits. The problem is you're working off of an SJW mindset or a skewed mindset to the point where you think like countries like a good example, Costa Rica, can't afford no kits. Well, yeah, they can afford no kits because they're a poor country. Shut it. I'm from Costa Rica. I know the health minister in Costa Rica. We talk often. We grew up together. We went to school together. So what you can't tell me is what you know about a country that you know nothing about that I grew up in. The fact of the matter is, the reason why a country like Costa Rica's cases are so low is because They have the kits, but there's only 500 cases. Well, that's all. Obviously people can't afford to get cases. Free healthcare, pimping. Free healthcare. Everybody can afford to get the cases done. Everybody can afford to get the tests done to them in Costa Rica because it's really cheap. You can either pay out of pocket or you can pay. You can have your free healthcare kicking. Either way, the government pays for it. And the sad part about that, the fundamental difference between Costa Rica and America is Costa Rica has about a little over like 55,000 kits and nobody to test them on for the fact that nobody's fucking sick. All the people that's gotten sick from Costa Rica have came from outside of the country and stayed in the country and or came in contact on a plane with one of them motherfuckers. That's typically why Costa Ricans are sick and have a low thing. The sad part about that is Costa Rica wasn't even practicing social distancing and their numbers still stay low. Let that shit swirl around in your head. Well, no, they can't afford it. Oh, shut up. If you know nothing, don't say shit, basically. It's typically what I told them. I go, there's countries in Africa that can afford this shit. Hell, Taiwan has little to no cases. What you trying to say? They're poor? No, they're right off the coast of China. They still get shit and they get kits and they get everything. Matter of fact, the UN sneaks around the whole entire Chinese thing just to get them kits. So you can't sit up here and argue shit that you know nothing about on a political world scale. You're sitting here running off of a emotional bias that you know nothing about. So I'm gonna need you to shut up and just bag stuff and bag stuff like you're pretty much what your intelligence skills is just bagging shit. You're a bag boy. Stay in your place. Stay in your own fucking lane. Don't talk about shit you know nothing about, bag boy. And that's literally what I said to the man. Because what you ain't finna do is try to tell me about my field when you bag groceries and you're older than me. It don't work like that. How you an SJW man and you're older than me? Like, think about this shit. Like, and it's one of those things where it's like, it's one of those things where it's one of those things where it's like it's one of those things where like you run into these people on a regular basis in public, and it's like, dude, you soy boy, shut the fuck up. Like, legit. Because like it's one of those things where it's like they get on your nerves to the point where you just want to bitch smack them. And these are grown ass men that you just want to bitch smack in the face, basically, and shove a gun in their mouth. Real shit. Like, sometimes I just want to shove a gun in their mouth and tell them to shut the fuck up, or I'll blow your brains out the back of your head. Like, that's literally how I feel about a lot of these soy boys in this world. Because like, it is what it is. Like, you're a man. Act like it. I'm gonna need you to let your testicles drop and quit acting like a bitch. Like, typically how I feel about a lot of these men who go out trying to preach some shit that they know nothing about, or trying to preach a narrative that they know nothing about. It kind of reminds me of the same narrative that SJWs say about, African Americans. They don't know how to find the DMV and shit like that. Really, nigga? That's what you believe, or that's what you emotionally feel? That's what you feel, or that's what you believe? And the sad part about that is, if you deal with these people, they're usually mutually exclusive with them. They believe it, and that's how they feel, basically. And they like to, because at the end of the day, if you're on the left, you're basically speaking your truths and speaking your feelings, basically. They when they speak their truths, they're speaking their feelings, and they feel like this is what's happening when in fact it's really not happening. The funny thing about that is they have actually done on the street interviews with black people and the same SJWs who believe black people can't find a fucking DMV, and they found that black people actually know where the DMV is, and a lot of black people, and depending on what neighborhood you live in, or what town you live in, or what state you live in, a lot of them get free IDs. Like, they hand out free IDs at the damn place for voting. So, because they hand out free IDs for voting, or they hand out very cheap IDs just for voting, you mean to tell me black people can't afford to get an ID now? Are you serious? Are you really serious right now? This is the hill you want to die on. And it's things like this that, blow my mind when it comes to people in this day and age that always try to push a narrative that doesn't fit, or they'll get mad at you and say, well, you're victim shaming. I'm not victim shaming. I am a nigga. It's not victim shaming in the least bit. Or it's not like, I'm not suppressing anybody. I'm merely telling the truth. You're trying to suppress motherfuckers and make them sound stupider than they really are. Basically, and the sad part about that, is usually when an SJW says something out of their mouth about a certain group of people, they're really making the people sound like they're too dumb to actually function in society. The same thing when it goes to women. Anytime an SJW or a feminist opens their mouth about women, they make women seem like they're incapable of making their own decisions or make women seem like they're stupid, which makes no sense to me. You want independence and you want to be strong, but you got this group of people over here trying to make women seem like they can't get nowhere bad themselves because they needed them to get to where they're going. And the funny thing about that was I remember there was an interview with Judge Judy where she said, last I checked, when I was actually going to go to school for law school, there was nobody there for me. I paid for it myself. I did everything myself. I did all this other stuff, and I graduated myself. Was nobody there with me when they were taking my test? Was nobody there with me to get me into that school? Was nobody there with me? And the sad part about that, you need more women like that to speak up because you got a bunch of women running around here based on emotion, saying the most craziest off the wall stuff and making the same group of people look like they're nothing or they look like they're not even intelligent in the least bit. And that's the thing that's the problem that I have with a lot of people. That's the overall problem I have with a lot of people. They tend to like push a narrative, then within that narrative they have a narrow mind and they tend to always be racially biased or sex uh they tend to have a gender bias when they push these narratives to the point where like you're literally impressed you're literally the one that's fuck my English. You're literally the ones who are oppressing that group of people. It's nobody else but yourselves that is oppressing that group of people. That's the problem. That's the overall problem that I have with a lot of these people when they open their fucking mouths. They say the dumbest shit in the world and they oppress the people who they claim they're trying to help. It's like the most asinine shit I've ever heard. Oh, hi, Lana Venture. I'm glad you can make it to the stream. Um, but the sad part about that makes it so crazy and funny is how people how people go about trying to preach a certain narrative while disrespecting the very people they claim they stand for or stand for or or trying to help. Like, where the fuck does this come from? Because I always make a joke that my abuelas, my grandmother and my abuela, dad's side, always say, and I quote, "I wasn't outside burning my bra, so I expect to be treated like a lady." End of story. I don't want to hear no shit from anybody. I don't want to hear no shit from the peanut gallery, both men or women. I ain't burn my bra. I expect to be treated like a lady. That's typically how it is. You got all these women out here just trying to who want to be women, but they're acting like men. Or you got all these women out here wanting to thinking that they're grown ass people, but they're acting like childish. They're acting very childish about how their image for all intents and purposes, which really sucks because you want to be treated equally, but you're out here acting like a child, or you're acting like you're not even old, you're not even out of grade school yet. And I hate to compare women and stuff like that, but there are women who actually act like women. Because I always say there's three categories: there's girls, there's women, and then there's ladies. That's typically how that works. You're either a girl, you're a woman, or you're a lady. Most women in the Western world fall between girl and lady. I mean, girl and woman. That's pretty much what it is. Most women in the Western world fall between girl and woman. They haven't quite got to the lady portion of actual growth yet. The sad part about that is the thing that bothers me the most about that is how they go about it and what they do to actually make it so that it's like in almost and almost not so great to actually live in the world with them for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is there's two mentalities when it comes to the girl and the woman and the lady. Typically, what I say about these two groups of people is girls and women, they're basically spoiled princesses who try to portray themselves as queens when in fact they haven't earned the title nor have they earned the crown. They just basically want to take the crown. So think of them as princesses that want to overthrow the current sitting queen. That's pretty much how you have to look at it. They're pretty much princesses that want all the power but want none of the responsibility and none of the they want all the they want all the power, they want none of the responsibility, and they want all their royal subjects to accept it. Best way I can put it. A queen, which is a lady, actually knows what's going on and is very aware of her situation and is able to politically and or politically and or unbiasedly, to somewhat unbiasedly work your way through it and make it so that that's a better outcome for all intents and purposes. The sad part about that, these tend to be the people who are there's not very many of them. These tend to be the people who are very good, who can balance home, life, and work, and not complain a bit about it, which is very few women and far between. Because you'll get a lot of women that'll talk about, I want to be an independent woman and this, that, and the other, and then they want to complain about their job and them not being able to find a perfect suitor and other crazy shit like that for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is when it happens, it's the most ridiculous shit in the world because you're trying to preach to me that you can do it, but your behavior shows me you can't do it. It's kind of like, it'd be no different than a 3-year-old. It'd be no different than a 3-year-old trying to tell me that they can pretty much do the household finances, which actually happened recently with one of my friends and his daughter. She said that she could do the household finances better than he can. He put her to the test and she failed very quickly. Yeah, his 3-year-old actually challenged him and he actually put her to the test and she failed very quickly. And she basically had to ask her daddy for help. Because mommy wasn't helping her. Mommy supported daddy and said, that's something you have to deal with daddy about because I know nothing about this. I don't do that. You took over the job, so you got to deal with it yourself. So his 3-year-old had to struggle and realize that she can't really do what she thinks she can do. That's typically what I do to my children. Whenever what's up, 20 piece. That's typically what I do to my children when they tend to challenge something or do something. I put them to the test. I actually make them put their money where their mouth is. So anytime my daughters or my son open up their mouth, I tend to actually put them to the test to see if they can actually pull it off. Sometimes they shock me. Sometimes they don't. It usually is what it is. But it's one of those things where it's like people always try to. You got a lot of people out here trying to wear their emotions on their sleeves and trying to do extra shit that they can't do for all intents and purposes. This is typically one of those things where it's like their emotional intelligence actually starts failing them and they have to actually use their actual logic and or reasoning at some point. Like my oldest 2 daughters, I love them dearly. They actually use more of their logic than they actually do their feminine wiles. Which is actually really funny because like my oldest 2 daughters, they're actually very logical about a lot of the shit that they do. What's up, MGTOWN to win? They're very logical about a lot of the shit that they do. Every now and again, they'll pull the female card. Like every once in a blue moon, they'll pull the female card, but usually it's about the right time for them to actually pull it. Like a good example of that is like the one time we were sitting there and I was at work and I was I was about to leave work and my one daughter who was 16 asked me, can I pick up something from the supermarket on my way home? I said, you have a car, you can go to the supermarket. She goes, but it's 11 o'clock at night, Daddy, and it's not safe for me to be outside at 11 o'clock at night. Anything can happen to me. And the sad part about that is, one, I knew she was trying to play up her not wanting to go out, and two, the neighborhood that the Giant Eagles was pretty much unsafe. So it's one of those things where it's like, you know what, you got me this time, but next time take your ass to Giant Eagles earlier in the day is what I told her basically. But yeah, but it was late at night when it actually was happening, and it made it really funny. And the sad part about that's one of the only times the few times that my oldest two daughters would actually ever pull the weak female card is at night, late at night when shit can actually happen to them because unlike feminists, they actually know their capabilities and their limitations to what they can and cannot do as women. They actually know their strengths and their weaknesses, and they know that they ain't finna pull some fake ass Hollywood stunt shit where they make a man fly like 8 feet and shit like that in a movie. So my daughters are very realistic about what they can and cannot do. Like, don't get me wrong, my daughters know martial arts and they know how to fight and shit like that, but they know their capabilities and they know that there's a time and place for that, and sometimes you either got to walk away from shit and or every now and again you got to fight for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where they know the fundamental difference between what they can and cannot do physically to another human being. Like where these feminists believe that they can pretty much tackle a rhino and they're this strong and stuff like that, when in fact they're really not that strong. That's just your your base brain, pretty much your base brain talking like you can actually do some actual shit because you think you're men. And that's typically how a lot of this shit works. What about red lipstick? Red lipstick helps. And the sad part about that is when it comes down to it, you end up finding out very quickly when women actually get themselves into stuff how big and bad they really are. A good example of that is all the lovely, all the lovely ridiculous fights that you see all across YouTube. Um, with with women, these skinny ass women trying to fight some big ass dude, and these big ass dudes are like literally pulling punches and really holding back on these women, which makes it so funny. What's up, me bag? Um, they make it. Concealed firearms are allowed. However, my daughters aren't old enough to carry in my neighborhood. My daughters aren't old enough to carry, which is a problem. So it would be illegal for them to carry at their age. They literally have to be, I think, 18, I think 17, a little bit before. They could be like 6 months out from 18 to be able to carry a firearm for all intents and purposes. So if I was to get them a firearm, I would be liable. They would go to jail or probably be in juvie and shit like that for all intents and purposes. And I would pretty much like go to jail for corrupting a minor or some type of crime against a minor if I actually gave my daughters an actual handgun. They know how to use them. Oh, trust me, they know how to use them. Um, they're badasses with handguns. So it's one of those things where it's like, I can't really give them one at this point in time in their life because I don't feel like going to jail or losing my children over some bullshit. Despite the fact that they're a couple years off from being 18, I don't feel like losing my children over some bullshit. Um, so it's typically how it works. Um, but yeah, that's a good question. That's definitely a good question because I know certain states and certain areas will allow your child to actually have a handgun with your permission. I think if they're 16, with your permission or something along the line, some type of written consent or something like that. I know there's some states that allow them to do that. Um, Usually those tend to be the southern states that allow you to get away with stuff like that. Which next time if I moved, I'm probably going to move to one of those states, so my daughters can feel like they're safe. Um, so at this point in time, I can understand their gripe about going out late. I mean, don't get me wrong. The neighborhood that they normally go to, the neighborhood that we normally shop in isn't that bad. But at night, with all the college students and the homeless people and the miscreants and the people that you don't see or know in society, I always refer to them as the 10 to 15% of society that'll do sick, vile things to any living thing, tend to lurk about that time of night anyway. So you got to always keep that in the back of your mind. And when you have those people out, you tend to not really know, or the people with psychological problems just lurk in the streets that they just let out of jail or let out to do stupid shit. You got to worry about that stuff when it comes to your children at night. And my daughters know that, like I said, my daughters are more realistic about what they can and cannot do. They don't believe that they're, Alita, battle angel, or they don't think they're Rey from Star Wars, or they don't think or have this false notion that, they can do shit like, Charlie's Angels and shit like that. They know what they can and cannot do, typically. However, I will say my daughters are very good with knives. That's one thing I did teach them. So they do have a pocket knife, but at the end of the day, it's one of those things where it's like you don't know if that person's going to bring a gun, and what is a knife really going to do? Um, what's up, Head MGTOW? Hey, fuckers. Yeah, but that's typically how a lot of that stuff works when it comes down to it. When you deal with a lot of people who in society, because like it's kind of like driving on society. Basically, is like driving down the street, driving down a road, a busy road. Like you have to have car insurance unless you live in certain places. You basically have to have car insurance. And when you drive, what's up, Jaguar Media? When you drive, you basically have to drive for yourself and the people on the road around you. This is typically how you have to plan your life in public. You have to plan for yourself, your own safety in mind. You have to plan for the other people around you safety in mind, and you have to plan for what somebody may do to anybody in your vicinity, in or you. For all intents and purposes, is typically how you got to do it. The sad part about that is men know this, men do this, and men practice this, and this is typically why men are more comfortable with doing a lot of the stupid shit, like walking down the street at night. Like I said in one of my videos, the reason why men are comfortable is because they're comfortable for one of two reasons. One, they're full of shit and they're scared. They're just as scared as women. And or two, it's one of those things where like they always keep their head on a swivel because dudes can get their ass kicked too, no matter how bad they are. Like I actually proved that with the one fist fight that a dude was getting into outside of a bar that I was talking about. That's typically how that shit works. So the sad part about that is when you see this shit happening, as when you see a man looking comfortable walking down the street, he's probably just as scared as you. There's no man in this world. I mean, not too many men would actually admit that they're just as scared as women walking down the street at night. But there are men that are actually scared to walk down the street at night. It is what it is. Especially when it comes to certain neighborhoods, especially when it comes to like the town area where all the shit seems to happen, like the downtowny areas. Trust me, men are just as scared to walk downtown Pittsburgh or downtown Oakland or downtown, downtown San Diego, downtown, Compton, downtown, Georgia or Atlanta. Men are just as scared to walk through these places just as much as you are. The sad part about that, the only thing that makes men different from women is they tend to be very calm about it, and they tend to always keep their head on a swivel and always have some. Most of them tend to have an out plan, so just in case shit happens, for all intents and purposes. That's typically how a lot of this shit works. Like a good example of that is MGTOW in the Wind. He's a full-grown man, but there's certain places MGTOW in the Wind won't walk at night, and it'll let you know in a heartbeat where he's not finna walk and where he is finna walk at night. Even though MGTOW in the Wind is in the military and he has military training and he was a Marine, there are certain places that MGTOW in the Wind won't walk at night. He may not tell you. We've had extensive talks about the shit, and it's just shit along the lines of that for all intents and purposes. Simple as hell. But that's typically how that works. Like, look, he's even admitting to you right now, he's not willing to leave his truck while he's in Detroit, Michigan, Detroit. He ain't finna leave his truck. He's finna stay right next to his truck or close to his truck in Michigan. So it's things like this that women seem to believe about men that's actually not true. That's typically that emotional intelligence that they lack, that a lot of people lack, or they, the unawareness of other people's, gripes and beliefs for all intents and purposes that they tend to cast off or put to the side or pretend like they don't exist for all intents and purposes. Free serving jalapenos. Simple as hell. But yeah, it's typically stuff like that where a lot of people tend to get themselves into messes and don't seem to understand. And that's typically one of those things where what I was talking about with a lot of people in society. They tend to react to things differently based on how they you avoid White Castles at night. Oh yeah, definitely. Shit. Like usually most restaurants at night, or especially fast food restaurants at night, you should avoid. Um, it's one of those things. It's one of those things where it's one of those things where it's like you as a human being have to be able to understand the situation and understand your environment properly and understand everything to a certain extent, and or be able to strategize how the hell you're going to get your big ass out of there just in case shit happens. This is typically what men always have. This okay. Let me rephrase that because I'm about to say men when in fact there's a lot of soy boys out here that don't think that far ahead. This is typically where most men, or a good portion of, I'm gonna say no, man, fuck it, where a good portion of men who actually know that shit can actually happen to them, and they're not invincible, know that shit can actually happen to them. This is typically the type of shit that they think about. It's typically like where you what you hear what McTown the Wind says when he says, "I fuck with people because I know I can be touched and or found, and I know I'm not invincible or untouchable or unfindable. So I fuck with people for that reason." He's honest about his level of security for all intents and purposes. And there's a lot of men that are very honest about their level of security that they have about themselves and the which they have about themselves when they're out at night. The sad part about that is women don't listen to that, and they tend to really think that men think men are invincible at night, when in fact, if you actually look at the crime statistics, more people who get killed, murdered, are men. Men get murdered at a higher rate than women. Even in Mexico, men get murdered at a higher rate than women. It is what it is. Men are always going to get murdered at a higher rate than women. Hell, there are even women in that statistic that are murdering men. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's like, it's like, dude, come on now. You gotta stop thinking narrow mindedly. You gotta stop thinking with emotion. You gotta be intelligent about the shit that's coming out of your mouth, because the sad part about that, it's fine to be emotionally intelligent, but the sad part about that, you're using emotion when you do it. It's all about how you feel when you do it. And the sad part about that is women corner the market. If let's just say if emotional intelligence was a stock, women corner the market on it, and they would have like a monopoly on emotional intelligence, and they bankroll it to their favor all the fucking time, because all they do is basically they'll take their emotions, they'll put it out there, and make everybody feel bad about them, so we can all come to their rescue. That's typically how this shit works. They cash in their emotional intelligence just so they can get support and love and cash and prizes for all intents and purposes. It's typically how that works. Women are able to do that, bankroll on that, and actually win. Men can't really do that shit. It's typically like a good example of that is all the transgender women, the trans women to men. They find out very quickly how hard it is to be a man when they transition from being a woman to a man. There's a lot of story. Every single story that comes out about it pretty much lets you know how they actually feel. They thought life would be easy as a man. They get there and it's not as easy as they think it is, and now they're thinking about going back, or they're very depressed about it and they're very emotional about it. It's typically how that works. Most women, well, all women who transition from women to man run into this problem, because especially if they work in an environment where there's a bunch of men, or it's like a male dominated environment. When they were a woman, everybody was willing to help them. When they became a man, nobody's willing to help them unless it's an emergency, or otherwise, for all intents and purposes. So women who transition from women to men learn this shit very hardly and very quickly. Um, and it's shit like this that I wish more of them would actually come out and speak on it, because it's very eye opening, and women would understand it much better if they actually did so. But women always sort of seem to ignore shit like that. What's up, Hidden McTow? What's up, Double I? Welcome to the stream, Double I. It tends to be stuff like that that makes it so they don't quite understand what's actually going on, or they're not up to date on the relevant happenings for all intents and purposes because they're blinded by their own emotional intelligence, and they're blinded by what they can actually gain easily from their emotional intelligence. It's typically how that works. But that's enough about the female side of the things. You got the male side of things where men will tend to do this shit too, sadly. Um, Especially if they're raised in this current society, like that soy boy man I was telling y'all about that was talking about shit he knew nothing about, and he was just a bag boy, and he was going bald, and he was older. He's I think he was about my age. He was already going bald. It looked like he was already going bald in high school, and he was actually trying to speak on shit that he knows nothing about when it came to the COVID virus. And I literally had to put him in his place. And the sad part about that, he's trying to tell me I don't know nothing about that when in fact I come in here quite often in my scrubs and or with my ID all the damn time to basically do stuff. I mean, to basically go shopping. And you're trying to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about a field that I specialize in, and you don't. Like, and it's shit like this that just blows my mind when you hear these men say this shit, because it's one of those things where I think to myself, nigga, I'm gonna need you to put a gap where your blouse is. That's typically how I feel about men that do that shit. Nigga, I'm gonna need you to drop your balls and put a gap where your blouse is. Like legit shit. Because you sound like a bitch right now. And that's pretty much how I feel about any man who actually sounds like a bitch in my ears. And it's one of those things where it's like they sit up here and they try to project what they're feeling onto me when in fact, no, nigga, I wake up every day looking to piss somebody off. I wake up every day hoping I could piss somebody off. I wake up every day living to piss somebody off because I'm a dick. That's pretty much how I am. I'm an asshole. So I wake up every day thinking about this shit. Matter of fact, if you go back to a lot of my older videos on this channel, it literally says in the comment section sometimes, let's see how many feminists I can piss off today. Or let's see how many soy boys I can piss off today. Let's see how many men or people I can piss off today. Literally my comment section. I recently changed it to enjoy instead of actually putting all that shit in there. I recently changed it to enjoy. But before, my comment section used to read, my description box used to read, let's see how many people I can piss off today. Literally what I always used to say. And that's typically how I feel about it. Because like I get enjoyment out of pissing people off. I get enjoyment out of actually, making people angry or getting I get enjoyment out of, making people feel some type of way, basically. And it's the sad part about that is it's not the fact that I'm actually looking to do it. I just capitalize on their failures or capitalize on their stupidity or capitalize on their lack there of emotional intelligence or trying to have too much emotional intelligence. I just capitalize on the shit and I just roll with it. It's basically like, think of it like a pick and roll in basketball. That's basically what I do with people's emotions, a pick and roll. like legit. Like I literally run a pick and roll, a solo pick and roll is usually how I roll. And the sad part about that, I noticed with a lot of these men who actually fall into that category, they tend to need a whole entire panel to talk shit on one person, or they tend to need a whole entire. They need a backup man to actually be able to talk shit on one man because they tend to be very passive aggressive, and that's one of those things that I enjoy about those type of men is the fact that they're passive aggressive, and I'm just aggressive. I'm just a straight asshole. I'm not passive aggressive about anything I do. And even if I am passive aggressive, it's usually so I can avoid, getting stumped by YouTube for all intents and purposes. Is usually when I'm being like passive. Like I was like, okay, I can do this passively and not get in trouble and get away with it. That's typically how I operate. I think about the shit that I can actually get away with versus the shit I can't get away with logically, passively. So if I can actively do it, I'm going to do it. If I can't actively do it, I'm gonna do it very passive, basically. Or I'm gonna do it actively, subliminally, for all intents and purposes. It's typically how I roll. So I'm always gonna fuck with somebody in all my videos. just like I'm fucking with somebody right now. If y'all don't catch, if you're not catching that, but typically a lot of times that you'll deal with people, you'll deal with men who do this shit on a regular basis, and I usually refer to them as SJWs, or men who are so far up women's asses that you can't. It's like, I refer to them as men up women's asses, or men who are sitting in women's pussies, basically, who haven't been born yet because they can't really cut the umbilical cord and they're still stuck in somebody's pussy, basically. And I'm not talking about sexually. I'm talking about, birth-wise. They're stuck in a woman's pussy some damn where, basically. They got their head stuck in a woman's pussy, basically, and they don't want to come out and deal with the real world or deal with real shit, basically, because they can't, because they're emotionally incapable of actually dealing with real shit. So they run off of emotion, which is typically a lot of the men in this world, which is sad. And what's up, Billy Goat? Billy the Goat? Like Billy Goat says, feelings are not facts. Feelings are not facts in the least bit. It's pretty much what it is. Feelings aren't facts. Because, I enjoy pissing people off that always think their feelings are facts. Anytime somebody brings feeling into it, I get a big ass smile across my face, like I'm Jack the Ripper. It's just facts. Anytime somebody's bringing emotion into anything, I get a big ass smile across my face, like I'm Jack the Ripper. I literally do. And I've always said this about myself, like, I'm a very sadistic motherfucker. I'm a super sadistic motherfucker. And I'm always going to get joy out of somebody's pain, emotionally and or physically. That's typically how I operate. And the sad part about that is, that's the fundamental difference between how you're reacting to me and how I'm reacting to you. I'm merely trying to get my rocks off to your pain. It's simply how it is. Because, like I always said, and I say this to people in private, like, when I'm being a sadistic bastard, I literally get a hard on for being a sadistic bastard. Like, literally, I like being a sadistic bastard more than I like sex. Like, yeah, I really do. I like being a sadistic bastard more than I like having sex. Like, it pretty much ranks sleep, education, working out, travel, being a sadistic bastard, hanging with family, sex. literally. I love being a sadistic bastard sometimes with people, and I love and enjoy every minute of that shit. What's up, no sweetheart? And I enjoy this stuff very much so. And it's one of those things where, like, you have to, as a human being, be able to enjoy life sometimes, even if it's at somebody's expense. Like, it might sound mean, but sometimes you got to. Like, real, you do. Like, pretty much, yeah, you do. Like Big Town the Wind says, if you're around me, feel at your own risk. Because I will capitalize on it. Legit. I will capitalize on it, and I am a dick. Everybody pretty much knows this. I don't play well with people with feelings. I don't play well with them at all. And people always try to project how they feel onto me, when in fact, no, dude, I'm being a dick. I'm enjoying every single minute of this. There's no emotion behind this besides pleasure. Nothing but pleasure. Nothing but pleasure. And that's typically how I feel about any opportunity I get myself into. Anytime I can actually troll somebody, or anytime I can actually be an asshole or a dick to somebody, I'm getting a extreme amount of pleasure out of it. There's no anger, there's no malice. Well, there is malice because it's you who is suffering, and I'm enjoying every minute of your suffering. So there is some malice there, but generally there's no other emotion behind it besides pleasure. At the end of the day, because at the end of the day, I only experience two on a daily basis. I only experience two emotions only. I experience pleasure, and I experience content. Outside of that, it's usually situational on how I feel about a certain person or a certain topic for all intents and purposes. It's usually pleasure or content. This is typically why I always say the thing, I'm not getting out of bed for less than $15 an hour or a good cause. Now, that sounds insensitive to a lot of people, but if you actually know me and got to know me, you would know, okay, yeah, that nigga got high standards, and obviously we're going to have to pay this nigga. It's typically what I said about the one story about the one woman who felt entitled to me walking her to her car at a hospital I worked at in a very nice neighborhood. Like, no, bitch, you're gonna have to pay me to walk you. You want to pay me so I can walk you to your car. It's typically how I feel. See, and you got No Sweetheart saying he likes the control of it. And the sad part about that is, I'll never use feelings to get what I want. I will use your feelings to get what I want, but I will never use my feelings to get what I want because my range of feelings aren't really there. I really don't have a range of feelings when it comes down to it. Like I said, I'm either experiencing pleasure or content. That's it. Every now and again, when it comes to certain things, like when it comes to certain things, like I'm hearing about somebody in the manosphere wanting to commit suicide. Depending on the person in the manosphere, I'm either going to be very cold and distant with them when I talk to them, or I'm going to try to be comforting to them. But it's going to be like a tough love type approach to it at the end of the day. Because I believe in tough love. Like, look, dude, if this is what you want to do, this is what you want to do. I'll help you. But if this is not what you want to do, don't be sitting there fucking around because I'll do it myself for you. Literally what I'll say to people. Like, literally what I'll say to a person. Like, if you're doing this for attention, I swear to God, I will come there and do it myself for you. And if you're not looking for attention and you're really going through this shit, I'm willing to help you. But you have to take the necessary steps to keep this in check. I'm not finna help you if you're going to keep falling off the wagon. I understand that there's a lot of people that fall off the wagon multiple times, but you got to be emotionally strong at some point and deal with your situation. It's typically how I feel about it. And that's typically how I approach a lot of the stuff when it comes to men in the manosphere, because I look at them based on their content that they make and how they portrayed themselves. If they're talking about committing suicide and the content that they make or how they act doesn't line up for me believing I need to help them, I will typically tell them, look, you better not be doing this shit for attention because I swear to God, I will do it for you myself. I will be your Dr. Gavorkian myself. And that's simply what I tell them. And it's like, they look at me like, well, ooh, you're wrong. Like, ooh, you're evil. Yeah, I am evil. Because don't waste my fucking time. Don't waste my fucking time at all. Because like I said, I'm only getting out of bed for $15 an hour or a good cause. If you're wasting my fucking time, either you're paying me or I'm killing you. So there's better be some real shit when I get out of bed. There's better not be some shit where I just need some attention. Because I'm going to be very pissed if somebody calls me and I get a hold of you. I'm going to want to kill you. I'm going to want to burn your house down to the ground. Legit. That's literally how agitated I get with people who look for that look for attention for all intents and purposes. I'm literally thinking about how fast I can get to your house and burn your house down to the ground. Legit. I don't give a damn who's in it. I'm gonna pull on my grandma like she pulled on my mom. On you. And skate off in the night. That's simply how I feel about people who do that shit, who do it to get attention or do it for attention. Because like certain people know not to call me for certain people because they know it's for attention, or they know they need help or something like that, but they don't need the type of help that I'm willing to offer them. So it's one of those things where it's like, well, we're going to deal with this without Tika. And there are certain times that they'll call me for people that they know that they need my help, and they know that okay, Tika will be good for this. So it's one of those things where it's like, don't take me away from my free time or my sleep, or I'm going to be very angry. I'm going to be a very angry person, and that's typically how it is. Because like at the end of the day, what people fail to realize about me, you're not the only ones that get treated like this. You're not the only ones that get treated like this. My children literally have to go through this shit. So for you to say, well, you're being unfair and you're being unjust and you're not being right, Tico, my children are raised this way. They know not to bug me about some bullshit, or I will dig in that ass with a belt. It's typically how it works. Or I will dig in that ass with my hand or a belt, basically, with some punishment. Like, don't fuck with daddy if it's some bullshit, basically. Let daddy know when it's some real shit. Don't fuck with daddy with some bullshit, basically. I'm gonna need my children to miss me with that bullshit, just like I'm gonna need these grown ass adults to miss me with that bullshit. And that's pretty much how I feel about a lot of these people who are growing up in this day and age, who tend to act like they're entitled to shit because how they grew up, or tend to act like because they got participation trophies, people should always agree with them, when in fact we don't really have to agree with you. Your idea was stupid, let it go and move on. Or I think your idea was dumb, I'm Tico Trend, suck it up, cupcake. Um, that's pretty much how I feel about a lot of people, especially men, who tend to act all get all emotional when I don't agree with them. Like, it's the funniest shit in the world, and it's like, well, why are you projecting, or why are you being all emotional? I'm not being emotional at all. I'm taking pleasure in your pain right now. I'm taking a lot of pleasure in your pain right now. That's pretty much how I feel. It is one of those things where it's like, you can't equate me to you for the fact that you're emotional. Just because you grew up a spoiled brat, or you grew up spoiled, and everybody always agreeing with you, and everybody always taking your side, or everybody always doing stuff with you, or co-signing on your bullshit. When you meet Tico, you realize very quickly, I'm not finna co-sign on your bullshit. At least without not investigating the shit. If I'm going to co-sign on your bullshit, I'm going to do some investigating myself. Because I actually believe in investigating reporting. Unlike half these news stations where they just spout out shit. I'll actually go investigate the shit, then come back and actually do the shit. To see how then weigh the pros and cons. Remember what you said. Remember what actually my findings is, and remember what this person said, and remember my findings, and usually usually come to a commonality for somewhere in the middle for all y'all bullshit y'all got going on around you. That's typically how I operate. So if you tell me this, that, and the other, this, that, and the other, I'm gonna go investigate this, that, and the other. A nigga gonna jump on a plane, go have dinner with the motherfucker, go drink a beer with the motherfucker, go do all this extra shit to find out if you're really telling the truth or you're lying. That's typically how I work. I will drop money on figuring out if you're lying or not. That's typically how I work. So it's one of those things. If you're going to tell me some shit, it better be on point. Because if I find out about it, you're going to hear about it. Because I hate motherfuckers that try to bankroll on emotions and fear and shit like that, or do some fear porn type shit to make everybody scared and have everybody with their feelings up on end and shit like that, and to be wondering why and how shit is actually happening. I hate when people do that shit. Because that shit is annoying as hell. Especially when I know the shit's not really true. Or especially when I know the shit sounds convoluted. Highfalutin without the falutin and shit. It's like there's some realistic shit, but like there's some shit that you come up with, then there's some shit that actually happens in my life where it's like, well, if I was to say it, it'd be like, okay, Tico is the type of nigga that'll, get himself into trouble anyway, so it's more believable than the shit that I'm coming up with off the top of my head, because Tico's just like that. Like if I tell you some shit like, I got into a fist fight and I got jumped by like 3 men in a black truck, it's more believable than you telling me like somebody's doxing me. It typically is what it is. Or if I say that the reason why I stopped making angry videos is because I got emails from two females saying that they get turned on and they play with themselves while watching my angry videos, it's more believable than you making up shit that it is. Another good example of that shit is, like I always say, I have a business partner who's racist, who's white, who I work very closely with, who I own a business with. That sounds more believable. It's more believable in my life than you saying I have a black friend. Because I literally do go out of my way to do the most uncomfortable shit, to put myself in the most uncomfortable situations to better myself as a human being. I'm willing to actually sit down and talk, like I said, to that guy who used to be the leader of the KKK. I'm willing to pay extra money to pick his brains, to figure out what makes him tick. I'm willing to put myself in uncomfortable situations to actually get to what I actually need to know about a human being. That's pretty much how I am. Yeah, like I said, I actually bought VIP tickets to go see that the ex-Grand Wizard of the KKK, get buy his book and pick his brain. because I'm willing to put myself in those. I'm sadistic enough to put myself in uncomfortable situations that I know I can handle myself. Typically, I'm not going to put myself in a situation if I don't think I can actually get out of it at least 50%. That's typically how I operate in life. If I don't believe I can get out of at a minimum of 50%, 50%, I'm not going to put myself in that situation. That's typically how I operate. Um, so it's one of those things where it's like I'm willing to make myself uncomfortable as a human being to learn about another human being. Um, Hell, I've been known to actually question and have interviews. I'm not really interviews because interviews would normally be televised shit. I'm more likely to question a serial killer or a man a man that you know who's killed multiple people and actually talk to people. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to go as far as to put myself at risk to do that. At the end of the day, I weigh my risks. I weigh my risks and assessments. I do a risk assessment analysis on what this person could do to me based on the crimes that they committed, based on who was actually helping them commit the crimes. Basically, like good example that's Charles Manson. Charles Manson. If you ever meet Charles Manson, if you ever got the chance to meet Charles Manson, you would know Charles Manson is a very persuasive person. He's a very manipulative, persuasive person. He can pretty much persuade damn near anybody into doing some shit for all intents and purposes. That's typically his strengths in life. He's never really killed anybody as much as he's gotten other people to do it for him, convince other people to do it for him. So anybody with that level of intellect is somebody you shouldn't fuck with if you don't have that level of intellect or if you're not emotionally strong or don't have the mental fortitude to deal with for all intents and purposes. It's pretty much what it is. So I was actually really actually got a lovely chance of actually talking to Charles Manson at one point. And the sad part about that, when you talk to Charles Manson, you have to have the mental fortitude to not fall under the allure of Charles Manson for all intents and purposes. If you don't have that mental fortitude, you shouldn't be out here trying to do shit that you can't do for all intents and purposes. Because anytime you can actually overcome somebody like him and or a Hitler and or somebody who's very persuasive and can manipulate a whole entire group of people into doing some shit, you typically have to approach that with a very high fortitude level of fortitude for all intents and purposes. You can't be some dumb motherfucker trying to go into shit like that. Like I said, I'm just sadistic enough, if not more, probably more sadistic than he is, to actually be able to sit there and not be manipulated by him because I'm a sadist. This is typically the type of shit that I actually, when I say this shit, this ain't some play shit. This is some real shit. I am a sadist. I get enjoyment out of this shit. And if I can actually get pleasure out of somebody's pain, I can. You learn very quickly about a lot of these people emotionally, how they grew up, the abuse that they went through. And the sad part about that is when you learn about this, if you're like me, you actually take pleasure in a lot of the shit that they actually went through. That way you're never manipulated by these guys for that fact that I have that failsafe of being a sadist in my mind, basically. Just in case you, let's just say, just on an off chance you do happen to cross over past my threshold or have a level have a level of manipulation higher than my fortitude, there's always that sadist switch in my mind that'll switch on. I always have a failsafe, in other words. I always have a mental failsafe for any situation that I'm actually going through. Let it be torture, let it be torture, let it be mental manipulation, let it be anything. Intimidation, anything. I have a failsafe for everything. That's typically how it works. Um, so it's one of those things where it's like to deal with people like that, you basically have to be able to have the mental fortitude or have the emotional intelligence to do so or have the mental fortitude to do so. The sad part about that is something I notice about women is they have high emotional intelligence, but most of the times they don't have the fortitude to back it. It's typically how that works. Um, it's things along the lines of that makes it so interesting about women It makes it both interesting and funny about women. Like they have the emotional intelligence to do any fucking thing they want and bankroll it and actually make money off of it or get like cash and prizes or help off of it and benefits out of doing so, but they don't have the mental fortitude to actually deal with the repercussions and consequences from them actually trying to capitalize on their emotional intelligence. They don't have the mental fortitude to deal with it for all intents and purposes. I've noticed. Um, Men have mental fortitude, but they can't really deal with their emotions as much as they can. They can hold off, they can control their emotions, but the sad part about that, when emotions become overwhelming in men, they tend to fall victim to women and or anybody else manipulate that can easily manipulate them for all intents and purposes, or that can manipulate them for all intents and purposes. So they tend to fall victim to that type of thing or that type of mental attack for all intents and purposes for this reason. Um, um, the sad part about that the sad part about that is when you actually deal with a lot of this stuff in this world, you tend to learn very quickly about various people and what they can and cannot do mentally, emotionally, physically, and or anything or otherwise. This is typically why I always say just sometimes you just got to watch people and listen to people. You learn a lot from watching people or listening to people. This is typically why, a good example of that is this is typically why cops do stakeouts. Or, if you've ever been like in a field like security firm or, operator or, the military, and you ran recon or some type of basically thing like that where you basically, you know, follow a person or tell a person to basically figure out what their schedule is, what their daily activity is, what their daily behavior is, what their routine is for all intents and purposes. You typically follow a person around to figure out what they do and what they're not going to do and what their daily routine is. Um, this is typically how this shit works. So when you actually deal with a lot of people, I always say pay attention to those people, both emotionally, and mentally. Pay attention to those people. Pay attention to their physical schedule. Pay attention to how they react to certain things. Pay attention to how they respond to certain things. Pay attention to how they assert themselves in conversations and shit like that. Pay attention to how they what place they hold in a conversation if you're in a group. Uh Pay attention to their pecking order in that group or their pecking order of importance in that group also as well. You got to pay attention to all this stuff to basically make it so you can understand a human being better. It's typically how that works. You always want to pay attention to a person, what the person got going on, so you can actually understand everything about them completely, 360. You want to pay attention to their mental state. You want to pay attention to their physical capabilities. You want to pay attention to like all this shit. This is typically the type of shit that a lot of people should learn from fathers or having a father in a house or having a grown man in a house that actually will teach you this shit or having growing up in a culture where you have to learn this shit to survive. Because the sad part about it, surviving isn't just learning to fight. Surviving isn't just learning to, surviving isn't just learning to fight. Surviving isn't just learning to manipulate people. There's more to this shit than just those two things. And this is typically where a lot of people run into these problems at, is they think that because they know how to fight, that's all they need to know. Or they think because a good example is women or some men. They think because they can manipulate people's emotions, that's all they need. There's more to this shit besides those things. And the sad part about that is a lot of people forget about that and they don't learn from it. And they tend to think that, what's up, Real Raymond? They tend to think that, shit, they tend to think that they got the shit when in fact they really don't have the shit. And it's one of those things where, like, if you're not if you don't have the mental fortitude and you don't have the mental capacity to do so, you learn very quickly that the person you're dealing with is not as they seem, or the person you're dealing with is not as easy target as you actually realize. This is typically why I always say to people, I don't mind playing stupid. I'll play stupid in a heartbeat. Oh yeah, I'll play stupid in a heartbeat. Because the neat thing about that is that's actually a sensu tactic. Now that I think about it, uh, does it plead ignorance? You basically, you basically, you basically, you basically show weakness so you can actually instigate somebody's arrogance for all intents and purposes. Um, and that's the thing that I love to do with people. So typically, when I first started my channel, I would just act simple. The sad part about that, when I first started my channel, even my English was limited when I first started my channel. Either way, anyway, but even still, the thing about it is like I was able to bankroll that and actually make people believe that I wasn't all that intelligent or I wasn't as smart as everybody thought I was and shit like that, or shit along the lines of that. And it's typically what it is. You always want to be able to bankroll your strengths into making you a better human being. Like I said, fighting is one thing, manipulation is another thing. You have to learn all this other shit about other people because you can fight all day. There's going to be a fight that you're going to lose either way. You can manipulate somebody all day, but there's going to be a time when you're not going to be able to manipulate a certain group of people or people in general. So you got to be able to use other things at your disposal to actually do what you need to do to finish your task or do what you need to do to actually get what you need out of that person or understand a person fully. So the sad part about that is a good example of that is something I've learned to do throughout the many years is I've learned in psychology that, and this is actually real shit. Matter of fact, I'm gonna use a hospital setting for this one. And I want everybody to listen very carefully to this. What I know personally is me being somebody who speaks another language, and English being a second language or a last language for me. I know personally, as a human being, I feel more comfortable when I'm around Spanish speaking people because that's what I grew up with. It's basically like comfort food for all intents and purposes. And using this in a hospital setting, if you're a Latino and you're in a hospital setting and your nurse or your doctors can speak Spanish to you, your rate of care goes up tremendously because you feel good and you feel more comfortable and you feel more relaxed because it's like people understand you and are approaching you from a total care perspective, if you know what I mean. So usually when I go into hospitals, a lot of the times a doctor basically knows I speak Spanish. Therefore, I know that my care will be better exponentially for the fact that I know that my doctor is comfortable with speaking Spanish to me and he's willing to actually go the extra mile to actually do so I can actually feel comfortable about my overall care. It's typically how that works. Because most times when I actually go into a hospital, I tend to get like Latina nurses for all intents and purposes, and they will actually speak Spanish to me, which is actually pretty funny. Like they'll start with English when they're in front of everybody else, but when we get to the actual room, they'll actually start speaking Spanish to me, and that's the thing that I love about like care within like that's one thing I love about overall care when you actually get care in hospitals. The sad part about that is what people don't fail to realize about overall care is they think because I do this good, I do my job so good that I don't need anything else. When in fact, a part of care and the thing that makes another person's you can tell the person that's there to basically just do their job, and the person who actually really takes enjoyment in actually doing their job. Is typically how it works. Because at the end of the day, me being a person of color and not always being able to relate that I'm actually a Latino or Afro Latino. When I actually go into a room with Latinos, I look at their name, I look at them, I listen to the accent or I listen to their voice or the inflections in their voice, and I'll typically speak Spanish to them. And it catches them off guard, and they're much more happier and they're much more comfortable because they're much more welcoming with me for the fact that they feel comfortable and now they feel open that I'm one of them to be able to actually give them care for all intents and purposes. So their overall care goes up. You can usually tell, like I said, the difference between a person who's doing their job just to do their job or a person that's doing their job who really loves and enjoys their job. It's typically how it is. Don't get me wrong, there are people that are very good at their job that would never speak another language, but when you go to extra mile for a patient or a customer, that customer actually remembers that, or that patient literally remembers that experience, and that gives you your overall better view. That gives your hospital or your company of the overall better view based on that interaction that they had with that person. That's psychology 101. It's not complicated. A good example of that is, this is why typically, if you ever go to a hospital, they're always looking for somebody who speaks another language, like Russian, Ukrainian, Arabic, you name it. They're looking for somebody to speak another language for the fact that they want to be able to give overall proper care to a human being for all intents and purposes that they're dealing with. That's simply how that shit works. The sad part about that is, at the end of the day, it's all about making a person feel comfortable. It's all about making a person feel welcomed. It's all about putting a person at ease. Is the best way I can describe it to you mentally. So you always want to have that skill where you're able to go above and beyond to put a person at ease and make a person comfortable around you. This is typically why I can always walk into situations and hear the most off the wall shit from women and or you know white people and or black people and or Asian people and or Arab people and stuff like that, and it's be like, and I'm not even fazed by the shit because I know what they normally say about other people for all intents and purposes based on the shit and their mannerisms and listening to them talk. I basically know. This is typically what it is. You basically want to be able to approach a situation, deal with the situation, and make the situation better. You don't want to sit up here and just make the situation as is. You always want to make the situation around you better. You don't want to be up here talking about ad hominems, talking about, well, the reason why cases in this country are so low because that country can't afford cases of COVID virus cases for testing COVID testing for all intents and purposes. You sound stupid. You didn't do your research, and 9 times out of 10, that country can afford that shit. You're just sticking your foot in your fucking mouth. Just because a country's a third world country doesn't mean they can't afford this shit. And this is where a lot of people mentally get fucked up because they don't do the actual investigation. They don't think outside of their narrow-mindedness or their ad hominem think, basically, that, this is typically saying people that think black people don't know where the DMV is or black people can't afford to get an ID. These are the same group of people that believe that, men are walking around free and thinking a man's life is like just the greatest thing in the whole entire world. And nothing ever happens to a man because he's a man. Then they get on the job with the man and they get injured. Then they realize very quickly, yeah, maybe not. But they don't ever want to admit that type of shit because they would have to admit that they were wrong the whole entire time. This is typically the type of shit that I'm talking about. Everybody's emotionally intelligent to a certain extent. And the sad part about that, like I said, women pretty much corner the market on this. Matter of fact, women have a monopoly on this shit when it comes to emotional intelligence. Then you got the soy boy cucks that literally are in second place, cornering the market on this shit too. So they're in second place. And the sad part about that, then you got men like everybody else that have a handicap when it comes to this shit and can get easily manipulated into believing shit that they don't really need to believe and or being forced to capitulate to the world and society around them based on their emotional intelligence. This is typically why you see all these stars running around here talking about, I'm sorry for what I said 9 years ago in a tweet, or I'm sorry for something I posted on my YouTube page back in 1999 and shit like that. I know they weren't around then, but I'm making examples of the ridiculous shit that people are apologizing for. Or I'm sorry that I used the N-word when I was 4 in elementary school. It's just shit like this that just blows my mind. And the emotional manipulation that they can do to people is what I'm talking about, in other words. And the sad part about that, a lot of men and a lot of grown-ass people fall for this shit, all because they're scared of losing what they have. The sad part about that, if you had enough emotional intelligence to do so, you would realize more people actually respect you for not apologizing for your shit if you just commit and own it and be like, yeah, I said it, and I ain't gonna apologize for it because it happened a long damn time ago. More people actually respect you if you actually say some shit like that. That's cold hard truth. And it's simply what it is. I mean, they may not always come out publicly and say it, but more people will respect you. Hell, the people on the left would actually respect you more if you actually did that shit. Because the sad part about the people on the left, no matter how much you capitulate to them, they're always going to move the goalpost further and further to manipulate you more and to make you capitulate more. So it's going to be to the point where you're literally slumped over backwards with your legs behind your back in an accordion position. That's how hard you'll be capitulating to the left. They're going to literally make you feel like you're chained to the ground with your legs behind your back in your hand if you actually keep on capitulating to them and keep on saying sorry and apologizing for shit you did a long time ago. They're always going to move the field goal post because now they know they can manipulate you into doing shit that they want you to do. That's typically how that shit works. And the sad part about that is the faster people figure this out, the better off we'll all be as a society. You don't always have to capitulate to people. You can be an asshole and own the shit. Like I always say, commit and own it. That's typically how I roll. Commit and own it. Only way I'm going to apologize unless I'm like ridiculously overly wrong. If I know I'm right, I'm going to keep on going for all intents and purposes. But if I know I'm wrong, and if I feel as though I'm wrong and I feel some guilt about it, which is very rare, I'm going to apologize about it. That's typically how I operate. So, like a good example is I remember I did a video about something, and I misspoke on something because it wasn't the fact that I didn't do the research. It was the fact that it literally came out my mouth wrong, and I backtracked about it and I said sorry about it and actually fixed it for all intents and purposes for that reason. That's typically how I work. I tend to work on the spot, and if I don't work on the spot, I'll work on it in my next video and say I'm sorry about what I just said in that last video. I meant to correct myself, this, that, and the other. Typically how I work, and it's one of those things where I do that all the time, and I'm willing to actually do research on the spot in my live streams if I have to. That's typically how I work. So it's one of those things as a human being, you got to be willing to actually do to better yourself as a human being. Oh, $95 to renew it. Nice. That also depends on state to state too, because certain states cost more than that, MGTOW, to win, depending on what state you in. You did that shit in Florida, it'd be a wrap. Well, no, you're talking about something else totally different. You're sorry you got caught. No, I'm basically talking about having to apologize for something you said eons ago. Like, no, I'm not talking about somebody cheating. That's typically cheating. That's typically cheating when it comes to cheating, when it comes to women. They're sorry they got caught. They're not sorry. They're actually sorry for the act that they committed. They're sorry that they got caught. Or if they do something wrong, they're not sorry that they're not sorry for doing what they did. They're sorry because they got caught. Typically, is how that works, is what he's talking about. So anytime a woman does something wrong and she's get busted, she's not sorry. She's not sorry because she's not sorry for the actual act and deed that she actually did. She's sorry because she got caught. That's simply how that works, is what he's talking about. But yeah, I done held y'all niggas hostage long enough. And I would like to thank everybody for coming out to the stream and watching. All the people from the beginning, all the women that came to the stream, all the anti MGTOWers and anti red pillars that came in and listened. I would like to thank all y'all guys too. All my trolls that came in and listened, thank you also. All the people who hate my guts that came in and watched, lurking in the background, thank you also. They're participating to my algorithm no matter what you do. The sad part about that, at the end of the day, all I want for human beings from any walk of life, I don't care if you're gay, straight, transgender, an Apache helicopter, a dog, a cat, a dinosaur, a T-Rex, so the Pope, the Bishop, the Rabbi, the priest. At the end of the day, all I want from people is for them to better themselves. That's all I want, is for them to better themselves. All I want from them is to improve themselves, improve upon themselves, and make themselves the better versions of themselves. That's all I want. At the end of the day, I don't like to hear excuses for why you can't do something. All I want to hear is, I got it, Tico. I got it. I don't like excuses at all. I don't accept excuses from my children, so I'm not going to accept excuses from you. And I do have children that are younger than Laszlo, so therefore I don't even accept excuses from them. All I want to hear is, I got this. That's all I want to hear. It's simply how that works. At the end of the day, all I want for people is to better themselves and realize what they're doing, and want them to understand what they're doing, and to better and basically either expound upon it and or own it, and or better themselves and change for the good, for all intents and purposes. That's simply all I really want. I want you to either own it or I want you to change for the good. If you can't own it or change for the good, then I really can't mess with you. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how long it takes for you to do so, as long as you're making an advancement in that right direction is all that matters to me. I don't care if it takes you 10 years to do so, as long as I see that you're actually trying. That's all that matters to me. I don't want to hear no excuses for why you can't do something. All I want to know and all I want to hear is, I got this. And I can fix this. That's all I want to hear. I don't want to hear, well, my mom or my ex, or I was raised by a single mother, or I didn't get the right education, or I didn't have a father in my life. I don't want to hear none of that shit. In this day and age, you can find male role models online now or around you to actually help you get to a better place. I don't like to hear no fucking excuses. All I want to hear is, I got this and I will change. Or I got this and I will do my best to change. That's all I want to hear from people. I want to hear no extra added excuses talking about, well, life threw me this hand, or my mom raised me this way, or I was raised in the hood, or I was overcoddled, or I grew up in an era where everybody got a participation trophy. I don't want to hear none of that nonsense. Fuck that nonsense. All I want to hear is, I got this and I want to better myself. That's all I want to fucking hear. But thank you, Sifu. Thank you for coming out, basically. All I want for everybody across the board, every living thing, whatever you identify as, even if you identify as an inanimate object, all I want for you is the best for you. All I want for you is to grow as a human being. Like I said, I approach my channel like I'm a dad, like I pretty much do at home with my children. I approach my channel like I'm a dad. So anything I say will be the same fucking thing I'll say to my children, whether you like it or not. It is what it is. So I'm wanting to say this to my children. What the fuck do you think I'll say to you in real life? This is typically how my channel's ran and operated. I don't like excuses. I like to find out that I'm doing better and I would like to do better with my life. If your lifestyle is if you want to be a fucking minimalist, more power to you. If you want to be a drifter and you want to be the best drifter you can be, I support you. If you want to be the best drug dealer you can be, and not have to worry about looking over your shoulders and doing it safely, I support you. If you want to be a serial killer and you want to be the best serial killer, morally it's wrong, but I still support you. I'm all about you being the best version of you, no matter what your choice is in life. If that's what you choose, I just want you to be the best at it for all intents and purposes. It don't matter what walk of life you do. It don't matter what your career path is, illegal or legal. I just want you to be the best at what you do for all intents and purposes. Is all I really want for you. That's it. I want you to be the best doctor. I want you to be the best criminal. I want you to be the best child. I want you to be the best anything that you want to do in life. If you're going to be a prostitute, be the best prostitute. Not something I morally support, but if that's your thing and that's your bag, get your bag. If you want to drug men and stick men up, I don't support it, but I guess do it big, I guess. I don't know. But it's typically one of those things where it's like, I support you no matter what walk of life you come from. If you want to be the best, most popular gay person in the whole entire world, I support you. Do what you do. I'm a libertarian. So at the end of the day, I want everybody to do good in their respective fields or lines of works, no matter what they are, illegal or legal. I want everybody to be the best at it that they possibly can be at it. I don't care if you're a mob boss, be the best at it you can possibly be. I don't give a damn if you're a hitman, be the best at it you can possibly be, and take pride in what you do. I don't give a damn what you do for a living. Just take pride in what you do and do it flawlessly and do it better and always be willing to improve upon yourself. That's all I want for people. But y'all have a good day or good night, depending on where you are in this world. Treat yourselves like milk. Do nothing but spoil yourselves and always better yourselves. Always keep an open mind so you can improve upon yourself and expound upon the knowledge you already have. Adios, my niggas.